My name is Celeste Navarro. 10 years ago, my older brother looked me dead in the eye at our parents' kitchen table and said, "You're an embarrassment to this family. You always have been." Then he laughed, that slow, deliberate laugh he saved for moments when he wanted to make sure the words have landed. My father was sitting right there. He didn't say a word. He just set down his coffee mug, looked at me, and said, "He's not wrong, Celeste. You need to hear this." My mother was at the sink with her back turned the entire time. That night, my father called me into his office. He sat behind the desk the way he always did when he wanted to feel official. He slid a single sheet of paper across to me. "I had the lawyer draw this up," he said. "You're removed from the family trust, effective immediately. And I think it's best you find somewhere else to live." I was 23. I had just been let go from my second job in a year, a graphic design position at a small agency that lost its biggest client. My portfolio was decent but not exceptional. I had a student loan balance of $41,000 and $300 in checking. I had a learning disability that made reading dense contracts and legal documents a humiliating, slow crawl. I had a stutter that showed up without warning in interviews and presentations, always at the worst possible moment. What I did not have was anywhere to go. I stood there holding that paper and I did not cry. I don't know why. I think some part of me had been waiting for this for so long that when it actually happened, it almost felt like relief. Like the other shoe had finally dropped, and now at least I knew where I stood. My brother Liam was 2 years older, effortlessly confident, and everything my father had ever wanted in a son. He photographed well. He never stumbled over his words. He had sailed through college on a combination of charm and our father's connections, landed a position at the family's commercial real estate development firm right out of school, and had been groomed as heir apparent since before I could remember. The Navarro Group. 30 years old, 7 properties across the Southeast, and my father's entire identity wrapped up in it. I was the other one. The one who drew things in the margins of her notebooks instead of taking notes. The one who got pulled out of class for resource room twice a week all through middle school. The one who, at my father's company holiday party at 16, froze in front of his business partners when someone asked me what I wanted to do with my life and stood there with my mouth opening and closing for what felt like a full minute before the stutter finally swallowed the sentence whole. My father had laughed it off. Liam had not even tried to hide his expression. That night after I was handed the paper, I packed 2 duffel bags in a portfolio case. I left the house key on the kitchen counter. Nobody came to the door. My mother's sister, Aunt Faye, lived 40 minutes away in Decatur. She was the kind of woman who kept a spare key under the back porch mat and never asked questions she didn't already have the answer to. She called me when I was sitting in the Walgreens parking lot at 11:30 at night because I didn't know where to drive. "Baby, where are you right now?" I told her. "You come here. I'm leaving the back door unlocked." I stayed on her couch for 3 days. On the 4th morning, she sat down across from me at the kitchen table with 2 mugs and a plain white envelope. "There's $1,200 in there," she said. "It's from the account your grandmother set up for me before she passed. I've been waiting for a reason to use it." She pushed it across to me. "Don't argue with me. And don't you dare go back there just because it's easier." I didn't argue. I took the money, drove to Atlanta, and started over. The first 2 years were the kind of broke that has its own specific smell. A studio apartment in Edgewood where the heat cut out every February. 3 freelance clients who paid late or not at all. Weekend shifts at a print shop on Ponce that smelled like toner and burnt coffee. I ate a lot of rice and eggs. I tracked every dollar in a spiral notebook because spreadsheets on a screen gave me headaches that lasted for days. Aunt Faye sent money when she could. Sometimes $50, sometimes $100. Always in a plain envelope with a single note card. The note card said things like, "You come from strong women, and your grandmother would be proud," and once, simply, "Keep going." I kept every single one in a shoebox under my bed. The stutter was the hardest part. Not the money, not the cold apartment, not the clients who treated freelancers like they were disposable. The stutter, it had cost me 2 jobs already by the time I landed in Atlanta. I knew it was going to cost me more if I didn't deal with it, so I found a speech-language pathologist who worked out of a community health clinic in East Atlanta and saw patients on a sliding scale. Her name was Dr. Ash, and she had the most unimpressed face I had ever seen on a human being. which turned out to be exactly what I needed. She did not feel sorry for me. She just handed me exercises and told me to come back in 2 weeks and do the work in the meantime. I went every other Wednesday for almost 3 years. I practiced out loud in the car, in the shower, in the break room at the print shop when nobody else was there. By year 2, the stutter had shrunk to something I could manage. It still showed up when I was exhausted or caught off guard, but it no longer owned the room. The design work was slower to grow. My first real break came from a woman named Bridget who ran a small sustainable clothing brand out of a warehouse in Summerhill. She had found me through a mutual contact, needed a full visual identity redesign, couldn't afford an agency, and was willing to pay me a flat fee of $2,400 for everything. I stayed up until 2 in the morning for 6 weeks on that project. I delivered it early. She referred me to 4 other people. Those 4 became 8. I started turning down the print shop shifts. I raised my rates and lost 2 clients who weren't the right fit anyway. By 2021, I had a real client list, a real portfolio, and a waiting period for new projects. In 2022, I registered Meridian Studio as an LLC. In 2023, I hired my first contractor. By early 2024, Meridian had done brand work for clients in 11 states, including 2 publicly traded companies, and our revenue had crossed $1.2 million for the year. I moved out of Edgewood and into a proper apartment in Inman Park with high ceilings and actual closets. I bought a coffee maker that cost more than my first month's rent in Atlanta. I still had the shoebox of note cards from Aunt Faye. I moved it from apartment to apartment like it was something irreplaceable. Because it was. Meridian's work was visible. Our clients were visible, but I had kept my own name off the public-facing website for the first 2 years deliberately. The design industry in Atlanta wasn't that large, and my father's firm did commercial real estate, not branding. But I wasn't ready. I needed the business to be real before anyone from that world saw my name attached to it. By 2024, it was real enough that I stopped hiding it. I updated the website. I did an interview for an Atlanta Business Chronicle feature on women-owned creative agencies. My photo was in the print edition. I did not think about whether my father or my brother would see it. I had stopped trying to control what they knew about me somewhere around year 3. The envelope arrived on a Thursday in late March 2024. Cream-colored heavy stock, the kind of stationery that costs more per sheet than most office paper costs per ream. My name was printed on the front, not handwritten. A return address from a wedding planner in Buckhead. Liam Navarro and Kendall Forsyth. Saturday, the 18th of May. The Biltmore Ballroom. Black tie. I stood in my kitchen holding it for a long time. The kettle started screaming and I didn't move. 10 years of silence. No phone call. No holiday card. No acknowledgement that I existed. And then a wedding invitation sent through a planner as if I were a business contact on a mailing list. There was no personal note. Of course there wasn't. I set it on the counter and called Aunt Faye that night. "He's getting married," I said. "I know," she said. "Your mother told me. I figured you'd be getting that." A pause. "What are you going to do?" I didn't answer right away. I looked at the invitation sitting next to my coffee mug and thought about Liam's face at that kitchen table. The laugh. The slow, deliberate laugh. "I'm gonna go," I said. Aunt Faye was quiet for a moment. Then you go looking like everything you actually are." I could hear the smile in her voice. "And you call me the minute you're back." I started planning the next day. Not the kind of planning that involves revenge in any dramatic sense. I had spent a decade building something real, and I had no intention of behaving like someone who hadn't. But I was not going to walk into that ballroom in something borrowed or forgettable. I reached out to a fashion designer client of mine, Petra, who owed me a significant favor and whose aesthetic was exactly right. I told her what I needed, something that said arrival, not announcement. She sent 3 sketches. I picked the one in deep midnight silk with a structured shoulder and a train that was just long enough to make an entrance. She had it finished in 6 weeks. The morning of the wedding, I was calm in a way I hadn't expected. I drove myself. I didn't bring anyone, not because I didn't have people I could have brought, but because I wanted to walk in alone. I wanted both hands free. The Biltmore Ballroom was exactly what I expected. Crystal, flowers, the low hum of generational money congratulating itself. My father's business associates moved through the room in clusters. I recognized 4 of them immediately. They did not recognize me. I had been 23 the last time any of them had seen me, quiet and forgettable at the edge of my father's events, and I was neither of those things anymore. I moved through the cocktail hour without rushing. I took a glass of champagne from a passing tray. I said hello to 2 people I didn't know and had a completely pleasant conversation about nothing. I was doing exactly what I had trained myself to do for a decade, be the most composed person in the room. I found Liam near the bar, deep in conversation with a photographer. He was wearing a navy suit, perfectly tailored, grinning at something. He looked older in the way that men who have had everything they wanted look older, a little soft around the edges, a little too comfortable. He turned and saw me. The grin did not fade gradually. It just stopped, like someone had cut the power. I walked over slowly, not rushing. I stopped 2 feet away. "Hi, Liam." His mouth moved. Nothing came out for a full 3 seconds. "Celeste." His voice was flat, barely audible. "What are you? Congratulations," I said. "She's beautiful. You should get back to her." That was it. That was all I said to him that night. I turned and walked away before he had a chance to find words. My father was across the room talking to a man I recognized as Fletcher Wynne, one of the Navarro Group's longtime investors, 3rd-generation Atlanta money, notoriously difficult to keep on a deal. My father was doing the voice he used for people who controlled the money. Smooth, a little practiced, slightly louder than necessary. He hadn't seen me yet. Fletcher Wynne had. He was looking at me with the focused expression of someone trying to place a face. I watched his eyes move to the small embossed card I was carrying, the Meridian Studio card I'd taken from my clutch a moment earlier to give to someone I'd been speaking with, and then back to my face. He stepped away from my father mid-sentence. "You're Celeste Navarro," he said. Not a question. "I am. Meridian Studio." He said it the way people say a name they've been trying to remember for a while. "You did the rebrand for Cornerstone Pacific last year." We did. Cornerstone Pacific was one of the 2 publicly traded companies on our client list. Their rebrand had been covered in 2 national trade publications. Fletcher Wynne sat on their advisory board. "I've been trying to get a meeting with your firm for 6 months, he said. "Your people keep telling me you're booked through Q3. "We are," I said, "but I can make time for the right conversation." He laughed. "The real kind," surprised. "Your father never mentioned you were in the industry." I looked at him evenly. "No," I said. He wouldn't have. Something shifted in his expression. He was a sharp man. He understood what I wasn't saying. Behind him, my father had gone still. He had finally looked up, finally traced the direction of Fletcher's attention, and found me standing there in Petra's midnight silk with a Meridian Studio card in my hand, having a conversation that was going better than anything my father had managed with this man in years. His face did the thing I had imagined so many times, not dramatically, not the way it happens in movies. Just a slow draining, like the blood had somewhere more important to be. His mouth opened. He took 1 step forward and stopped as if he'd walked into glass. I did not look at him for more than a second. I turned back to Fletcher. "I'll have my assistant send you something Monday," I said. "Good to meet you properly." I handed him the card, excused myself, and walked toward the far end of the room. I found a quiet corner near the floral arrangement and sent Aunt Faye a text. "I'm here. Everything's fine. Talk later." Her reply came back in under a minute. "That's my girl." I was standing there when Kendall found me. Liam's bride. She had clearly come looking deliberately. She moved through the room with purpose, and her smile was the kind that cost something to maintain. She was stunning in the way of women who have been told their whole lives to be stunning and have obliged. "You're Celeste," she said. "I am." She glanced around to make sure no one was close enough to hear. "Liam told me you were estranged." That's all he ever said. Estranged. "That's accurate," I said. She looked at me for a moment. "Fletcher Wynne just spent 20 minutes asking my future father-in-law why he'd never introduced him to you." Her voice was very controlled. "My father-in-law didn't have a good answer." I said nothing. I let the silence do what I'd learned years ago. That silence do what I'd learned years ago. That silence could do when you trusted it. Kendall's expression shifted. Not to anger. to something more like the face of someone doing a fast, uncomfortable calculation. "Is there something I should know," she asked, "about this family? Before tonight is over?" I considered that for a moment. "That's between you and Liam," I said quietly. "But I'll tell you this, whatever he told you about why we don't speak, ask him to tell you the whole version, not the short one." She held my gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded once, the way people nod when they've already made up their mind and are just confirming it, and walked back toward the head table. I left the reception at 9:30. I said goodbye to no one. I drove back to Inman Park with the windows down even though it was May and the Atlanta humidity was thick enough to wear. I called Aunt Faye from the parking garage. She picked up on the first ring. "How'd it go?" "Fine," I said. "Better than fine." I leaned back against the headrest. "Fletcher Wynne wants to meet. I think we might get the Wynne Properties account." She laughed, low and delighted. "Of course you do." I talked to Kendall at the end, of course. "What did you say?" I told her to ask Liam for the whole story. Aunt Faye was quiet for a second. "And you think she will?" "I think she already suspected there was one." Another pause. Then softer. "Are you okay, baby? Really?" I thought about that. The ballroom. My father's face. Liam's grin stopping like a cut cord. Fletcher Wynne saying your people keep telling me you're booked with that surprised laugh. Kendall nodding the way people nod when they've already decided. "Yeah," I said, "I actually am." "Good." I could hear her settling into her chair, the familiar creak of it. "Then come for breakfast Sunday. I want to hear everything." "I'll be there at 9, I said. I sat in the parking garage for another few minutes after we hung up. Not because I was upset, just because I wanted to stay in that particular moment a little longer. The quiet after something that had been waiting a long time to be finished. The Monday meeting request I sent to Fletcher Wynne's office became a Tuesday lunch. The Tuesday lunch became a proposal. By the end of June, Meridian Studio had signed a contract with Wynne Properties for a complete brand architecture overhaul across their 14-location portfolio. It was the largest single contract we had ever closed. I hired 2 more full-time designers in July. I didn't hear from my father directly. I hadn't expected to. What I heard, through Aunt Faye, who heard it through my mother, was that Fletcher Wynne had made a number of pointed remarks to people in the Atlanta commercial real estate community about discovering talent that had been, in his words, inexplicably kept out of the conversation. He had not named names. He hadn't needed to. I also heard that Kendall had postponed the honeymoon, that she and Liam had spent the week after the wedding, and what my mother described, and a message she sent Aunt Faye, and clearly meant for me to eventually see, as a very difficult conversation. I didn't know what came of it. It wasn't really my business. I had said what I said to Kendall because she deserved to have accurate information before she spent a life with someone. What she did with it was hers. My mother's message to Aunt Faye had ended with, "Tell her, I think about her." Aunt Faye forwarded it to me without comment. I sat with that for a while. My mother, who had stood at the sink with her back turned, who had gripped the banister and said nothing, who had chosen, over and over, to stay quiet when staying quiet cost me everything. I thought about what I wanted to do with I think about her. I wrote back through Aunt Faye, "Tell her I know. Not forgiveness, not a door swung wide open. Just an acknowledgement that she existed, and that I'd not disappeared entirely into not caring. That felt like the honest thing, and honesty was something I had been committed to for 10 years, even when it was inconvenient. Wynne Properties went live with the new brand identity in October. Fletcher sent a handwritten note to the studio. The press coverage was good. My team celebrated with dinner at a place in Ponce Market that was too loud and perfect. I put the shoebox of Aunt Faye's notacards on the shelf in my home office where I could see it. I stopped hiding it in the closet. The first Sunday in November, I drove to Decatur and had breakfast with Aunt Faye like I had done every few weeks for the past 10 years. She made biscuits from scratch the way my grandmother had taught her. She asked about the team, about the Wynne project, about whether I was sleeping enough. She did not ask about my father or about Liam. She had never been the kind of person who needed to pick at things once they had healed. After breakfast, she went to the back bedroom and came back with a small envelope. She set it on the table between us. "Your grandmother left that for you," she said. I've been waiting for the right time to give it to you. Inside was a single index card in handwriting I hadn't seen since I was 12 years old. My grandmother's script, tight and even. You are smarter than any room you will ever walk into. Don't let them make you small. Grandma V, I held it for a long time. Aunt Faye refilled my coffee and didn't say anything. She knew when to be quiet too. It ran in the family. I put the card in my coat pocket and drove home with the windows down even though it was November and I was cold. Some things you just need to feel the air on your face. The shoebox has 31 note cards in it now. My grandmother's is on top. I still have the $1,200 in the original envelope, rubber banded, and the fireproof box in my closet next to my business registration documents and my grandmother's card, the copy Aunt Faye made before she gave me the original. I don't know that I'll ever spend it. Some things stop being about money somewhere along the way. Viridian Studio is 5 years old this spring. 18 employees. Work in 23 states. A wait list. My name is on the front door. I've thought a lot about what actually happened that night my father slid those papers across the desk. For a long time I told the story as a story about loss, what I walked out of, what I didn't have, what was taken. It took me years to understand it was also a story about what got cleared away. When people make decisions for you, when they decide you're not worth keeping, not worth defending, not worth a single word spoken on your behalf, they're also, without meaning to, deciding that you have to figure out who you are entirely on your own terms. There's no inherited position to coast on. No family name doing quiet work in rooms you're not in. No cushion between you and the consequences of your own choices. That's terrifying when you're 23 and broke and sitting in a parking lot at midnight. I won't pretend it wasn't, but it also means that everything you build is genuinely yours. Every client, every contract, every person who trusts you with their work. They chose you because of what you actually did, not because of whose daughter you are. My brother Liam had every advantage I didn't. The connections, the firm, the name, the easy confidence that comes from never once being told you're not enough, and he still needed to use cruelty as punctuation. That's what I kept coming back to, years later. People who are genuinely secure don't need to diminish anyone. The laughing, the slow, deliberate kind. That was never really about me. It was about him needing me to be smaller so he didn't have to examine how little of himself he'd actually built. My father made a calculation that night. He decided that protecting his image and his investor relationships was worth more than his daughter. That's not a monster movie kind of evil. It's a quieter, more ordinary failure. The kind that happens when someone has spent so long measuring their own worth in assets and appearances that they've forgotten how to weigh anything else. He got the short-term outcome he wanted. And then, slowly, he didn't. Not because the universe punished him in some dramatic way, but because the choices people make about who they are tend to compound over time, the same way good ones do. Aunt Faye once told me, passing the butter at her kitchen table like it was nothing, your grandmother always said the ones who leave you with nothing are the ones who teach you what you're actually made of. I didn't understand that at 23. I do now. What I know is this: integrity is slow. It doesn't pay off in a week or a year. It pays off in the accumulation of small decisions made correctly. The client you were honest with, even when it cost you the job. The boundary you held, even when it was easier to fold. The work you did at 2 a.m, not because anyone was watching, but because you cared about getting it right. None of that is glamorous. Most of it is invisible. But it builds something that belongs entirely to you, and it cannot be revoked by someone sliding a piece of paper across a desk. Celeste's name is on the front door of Viridian Studio because she earned it one Wednesday afternoon at a time. One speech therapy session at a time, one honest conversation at a time. That's the whole story. There's no shortcut in it and no magic. Just a woman who decided that what they said about her was not the final word and then spent 10 years proving it quietly to no one but herself. That's the only revenge that's ever worth anything.